And the man in the middle then we'll come back to the panel. A man with spectacles in the third row from the back, I think it is. Yes.
I was going to say, it's really quite ironic. We usually expect our governments, when they can't, to be able to step up, have a view, take difficult decisions. And when it comes to this, where they have taken a view on what should happen on June the 23rd, everybody suddenly goes off complaining, and I find that very, very strange. But this debate, I think, is too narrow on the whole. Not just about trade, and by the way, I think we need to focus on geographics a little bit more. The reason why we trade so much with the European Union is because we're only 20 miles off Calais and we're joined by a tunnel. And the reason why we have a trade deficit with the European Union at the moment is because we are very, very unproductive as an economy. We're not producing enough high-wage, high-skill jobs that we need to compete. But this is more about the economy. This is about how we work with others in a world that's ever smaller, where a decision that's made over in Shanghai affects our daily lives here. I would prefer to have some influence and a decision, a choice in how that is arranged, rather than isolate myself, insulate myself, invite these problems along to an extent it will cost far more in the long run to deal with them when we've suddenly got the message.
OK. And you in the blue hat. Yes.
Douglas Carswell, my hero. A man speaks up, because I'll tell you what, that £9.3 million should not be used as a piece of government propaganda. It should be invested back into the British people. You know, I read a recent statistic, 9,000 veterans. What are we doing about them? That 9.3 million should be going to them, the junior doctors, the NHS, our own people, not being invested into a piece of propaganda. No.
All right. Well, a man who speaks up in the audience too. So thank you very much. I think at this stage we'll very brief. You want to make a brief comment?
Just going to say, I know Douglas is very, very worried that there's not going to be an even playing field. But frankly, with the Sun, the Telegraph, the Times, and the Mail daily pumping out fibs and lies about the European Union, I think it's time we had some proper facts out there. And I would merely point out that the owners of those newspapers are not resident in the UK paying tax.
All right.
But the people who pay for those newspapers are.
Ruth Lee?
Are you sure about that? Because I think they'll sue you.
Well, where do the Barclays live?
Fair enough.
Where's Rothermere?
For goodness sake, why did I say that?
You asked me.
I don't think I shall interact with you.
Where does Rupert Murdoch live?
I've no idea, darling.
America. Because he's only allowed to own a newspaper if he's an American citizen.
All right, fair enough. I'm not going to challenge you ever again.
It's an extraordinary point of view, isn't it, to blame newspapers for holding points of view with which Chris disagrees?
No,
surely the fact that the newspapers have those views reflects what the readers think and want. Where is the government's...
Douglas, you know perfectly well it reflects the owners, the proprietors' views, not the views of the British people.
Ruth Lee.
I was actually going to just comment on something that Anna was saying. She was talking about Norway and you were talking about Switzerland. When we leave, as I hope we will leave, the British government will negotiate a British settlement for us. It won't be Norwegian, it won't be Swiss, it'll be British. And let's not beat around the bush that we have a lot of leverage in those negotiations. The idea that we're going to be some pathetic little supplicant is absolutely absurd. They need us and we need them and we want to cooperate, but by goodness me, we don't need to be in the European Union to be able to do that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll take just... I have 10 hands up at the moment. I'll take just 1 point from, you, because you've got the tallest hand, yes.
Oh, thank you.
No, you haven't got the tallest hand. He has.
Thank you.
But be brief if you would.
Chris.
Well, you probably want to say the same thing, but be brief if you would.
I believe we do.
Right.
And, 9.3 million on a government pamphlet. I'm not sure of the contents because I believe it's being distributed next week. To put it in context, this country is contributing roughly £350 million a week to the European Union. And what are we getting in return? I voted in the 1975 referendum. I've been pro-European for many years, but in recent years, my mind has changed, and I'm going to vote to leave the EU.
Okay, all right. We're going to go on. We're going to go on. Thank you. The only thing I would say, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who we all revere, says the actual figure is not 350 million, but 154 million when you deduct the benefit that comes.
Exactly.
I say that in a disinterested way, just to correct the point. But we now need to move on to another question, because we've got a lot of other questions to come tonight, and we've already had 20 minutes of this programme. But what I want to say before that is, if you want to come and take part in this chaos of question time during this run-up to the EU, we're going to be in Doncaster next week, and we're in Exeter the week after that. So you can apply via our website. The telephone number's on the screen there. I'll give more details at the end. And we'll go on to a question from Michael Manuel, please. Michael Manuel.
Can we ever have a just and fair society when it seems that only the little people pay their fair share of taxes?
So Panama raises its head. Anna Soubry.
Well, there's a statistic which I thought was very interesting, and I think it's very important as well, that the top 1%, the most wealthy people in our nation, pay 28% of all the taxes that we collect. So, whilst I agree with you that obviously there are devices and schemes which actually we have cracked down on, we introduced 40 measures in the last Parliament to close off these loopholes. But it often looks like that the rich can escape from paying taxation. As a government, we've done more than any other to close off their loopholes, which is why it raised £2 billion. We've got another 25 measures, I believe it is, for the next Parliament. So we're doing all the things that we should be doing. And the most important thing, as you say, sir, is that everybody should pay their tax. And you're absolutely right, doesn't matter who they are, everybody should do it. And
So
that's
no
exactly
offshore tax havens, is your view?
Well, no, I think if you live in this country and you earn income and you have money that you accrue, you should pay your taxes. Now, where you choose to invest your money is a matter for you. But when you are earning income, and if you sell assets, and therefore you have capital gains tax by way of example to pay, those are the things that you should do. And that's why, as I say, we've introduced all these measures. We're raising billions of pounds because we're closing off all the loopholes that, frankly, have existed for many, many years under previous governments, and we're doing the right thing by that, and that's the right thing to do.
Chris Bryant?
What a load of nonsense that was. I mean, really. It's absolutely clear there is one rule for the very, very rich and another rule for the rest of us. We all have to pay our tax through PAYE. Some people get to pay expensive people to find a way around it. We don't know. Anna's completely wrong. We don't actually know exactly how much people are paying, the very wealthy are paying on their tax, because 8% of the world's wealth is hidden in offshore tax havens.
So why didn't you change this when you were in government?
And so we did. We did a great deal.
Oh, so we undid it? No, we didn't.
Don't interrupt.
We tied up the loopholes that you left
absolutely
us.
Nonsense. Actually, the FT did a very close survey of all the tax avoidance measures that had been done by the Blair, Brown and recent government, and they found that the Blair-Brown governments had done 4 times as much. They brought in £100 billion of thus far unpaid tax. And in particular,
Chris,
what really disturbs me is first of all, that we introduced a very effective measure, which was the disclosure of tax avoidance schemes measure. We strengthened it at every point since 2004 when we introduced it, and the Conservative government, or the coalition government, when they came in 2010, started watering it down. David Cameron lobbied at the European Union to say that personal private trusts should not be open to the same transparency rules as for corporations. Now, I just disagree with that. I think we should all be in this together.
Chris,
right,
under Labour...
Come back on this.
Under Labour, rich people didn't pay stamp duty. Under Labour, millionaires and billionaires paid less tax than their cleaners were paying. Under previous Labour governments, we had loophole after loophole propped up by your party that failed to do all these things. And that's absolutely what we stopped doing. 40 measures raising £2 billion in extra taxes. We're the ones who cleared up your
No, you
mess.
said that that's what you were going to do. You
No,
said
we
you were going to
didn't.
get £5 billion out of the deal that you did with Switzerland. Now it's pretty clear we're not going to get a quarter of that. You said that you got rid of all the tax havens in the overseas territories. When I was the Minister for the Overseas Territories, I was refusing to allow them to continue their tax haven status if they wanted to borrow more money, which is what they wanted to do. The moment we lost power in 2010, your government came in and said, oh no, you can carry on borrowing as much as you want and remain as a tax haven.
Do you want to have direct rule in these places like the Virgin Islands? Go to war and take them back?
I can think of, you know, I can imagine Pitcairn Island would love to have Boris as its, perhaps as its governor. But I think we should consider very, very closely what we do in relation to our overseas territories, because these are countries where we still have a contingent liability, where if they go bust, we have to fork out, and they're trading on the British name. So I don't think we should allow them to continue without full transparency. The British Virgin Islands, Turks and Caicos, Anguilla,
So why didn't you
Bermuda,
do
all of them,
something about
because
it when
I
you were in
was doing
government?
it when we were in government. I was the minister in charge. I was the
Why didn't
last
you get it
minister,
through?
Anna, I was the last minister who said to impose direct rule in Turks and Caicos because of the massive corruption there in 2009.
Right, the woman up there in the second row from the back. Yes.
Will the government be challenging those named in the report with the same vigilance as it does benefit claimants?
Exactly. Ruth Lee, what do you say to that? Benefit claimants get looked at very carefully. Will the rich be looked at as carefully?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that when Anna was saying the top 1% of taxpayers pay a very high proportion of the total tax bill, she is right. But they are taxpayers. And the trouble is that such a lot of them actually squirrel away their incomes and their dividends in these tax havens that Chris was talking about. So I take your point, Anna. I'm not disagreeing with that, but in another way, I'm not disagreeing with you either. And I do think that of course, I think you were referring, the gentleman, sorry, the original question was of thinking about the Panama Papers and this curious legal firm called Mossack Fonseca, or whatever it's called. Fonseca. Mossack Fonseca, is that right?
Yeah.
That was dealing with all these people who are obviously dealing with the tax havens, many of which are overseas territories. I think half the dealings that they were dealing with were actually British Virgin Islands, which is an overseas territory.
But do you think it's right that this should be allowed to happen, that people like Blairmore Investment Trust, perfectly legally... I mean, President Obama said an interesting thing. He said, it's legal what's been going on, but that's the problem.
I think the problem is because they're secret and there's a lack of transparency, it covers the legal, which is avoidance, or even aggressive tax avoidance, which is strictly legal, and it occurs all sorts of evasion as well, money laundering, dodging sanctions and the like. And this comes back to the point that Chris was making, really. You need absolute transparency in these particular tax havens, and then at least you know whether they are legal or whether they are illegal transactions.
Michael Manuel, what do you think? Mr. Manuel, what do you think of it?
I've listened to the Punch and Judy show. I think it's great. But I also think that what we need is specific new policies to end this division which has come about in our society. And one of the things I might suggest is a tax returns that we all make should be made public, so that I can see your tax return, Mr. Dimbleby, and you could see mine. And this could obtain throughout the whole of the country, and we could look carefully at those people who are not paying what appears to be the right tax. And it may well be then that we can get in touch with the tax office man and say, would you be kind enough to investigate this person? It appears to me that they are paying too little tax.
Irvin Welsh, do you like to see that happen?
I mean, I think it's inevitable, and I think it's, it's probably the tip of the iceberg, and everything that's happened over the last 30 years economically kind of would seem to kind of indicate that. I mean, it's such a strange thing when you look at what's actually happened and the response of the people involved. The great tragedy for them is that they've actually been caught. This is the whole sort of problem as far as they're concerned. And you can bet that every single resource will be going into making sure that the public don't get that kind of information again that they got in the Panama leaks. So this is probably the last we'll hear of this thing for a while, but you can bet your boots it will continue to be going on.
Have you ever been tempted to put your money in the Virgin Islands from Chicago, where you live now, or are you...
Yeah, I mean, the Virgin Islands is too far away. I'd probably go for the Cayman Islands, David.